Hello there, and welcome to my new devlog series about my game called You Must Die. It's basically Call of Duty Zombies, but with PS1 style graphics. This project actually started as my senior capstone for college, but after I graduated, I decided I wasn't done with it. My goal now is to keep developing it until it reaches what I really want, and with all the mechanics and features I wanted to include. When I first started the project, I made a Trello board and basically brainstormed everything that makes COD Zombies, feel like COD Zombies, like guns, zombies, barricades, the mystery box, all the mechanics that make the mode what it is. To keep everything organized, I split development into 5 phases. Phase 1 was prototyping. It was just making the game playable. So movement, shooting, and basic zombie AI. Nothing looked good, and honestly, it wasn't supposed to. The entire goal was proving that the core gameplay actually worked. If I had zero artistic direction and was only focused on programming, I probably would have looked at this prototype and said, yep, game's finished. But obviously that's not what a finished game looks like. So I moved on to phase 2. This phase ended up taking way longer than I expected. I started by drawing the map in Photoshop using a simple square grid, thinking I could just recreate it one-to-one inside Unity. Turns out that wasn't happening. Scale felt completely off, so I went back into Photopea, doubled the size of the layout, rebuilt it in Unity, and that felt more natural. Then I repeated the process for every room in the map. At the same time, I cleaned up a lot of the prototype code because prototype code usually turns into a mess. And then once the map layout was finished, I started expanding the actual gameplay. This is where I added barricades, power-ups, UI elements, and started building the playable version of the map inside Blender. Now here's what I thought was a really smart decision, because instead of making walls out of cubes, I used individual planes. The reasoning being was that, the original PlayStation used simple geometry to save performance, so I'll do the same. So in future me absolutely regretted that decision. Since every wall has its own object, texturing became incredibly repetitive later on. It worked, but it also created a lot more work than necessary. Sometimes I didn't realize that a shortcut isn't actually a shortcut until I'm hours into the project. And this is where phase 4 comes in, which is where I implemented the PS1 graphics. I followed a tutorial from this dude right here, and thanks to him, this is how I achieved the PS1 look, and surprisingly, it was easier to implement the shader than I thought. The hard part wasn't actually making the game look like a PS1 game, it was actually texturing everything. For every object, I'd unwrap the UVs, export the layout, bring it into Photoshop, paint the texture, import it back into Blender, test it, notice something looked off, go back into Photoshop and export it again. And then repeat that process over and over. Because I made so many separate wall pieces earlier, I ended up repeating this workflow dozens, if not hundreds of times. Looking back, I probably could have reused a lot more UV layouts and saved myself a ton of time. And remember when I said I built the walls using planes instead of cubes? Yeah, that decision came back to bite me. As I started adding lights to the map, I ran into some nasty light bleeding issues. For example, if you were standing in the dining hall below the library and looked up, you'd see light bleeding through the ceiling where it definitely wasn't supposed to. After digging through forums, I learned that planes can't really block light the same way solid geometry can, since they're only single face and the backside isn't rendered, which is great for performance, but not so great when you're trying to keep light from passing through your walls. After a lot of trial and error, the best solution I found was slightly adjusting the angle and intensity of the lights until the bleeding was barely noticeable while still lighting the room well enough for the player to see. No wonder why lighting art is an actual specialization in the game industry. Well, that was a lesson learned. And finally, phase 5 is where I was trying to rush through the game because I was actually running out of time with my due date for my senior overview. So everything left on my roadmap basically became stretch goals, and some features had to be cut so I could actually submit the project. Thankfully, I still managed to add the mystery box and a small Easter egg where players can find 3 cassette tapes to unlock a secret song. After that, I packaged everything up and released the launch build on itch.io. At that point, I considered the school project finished, but not the game. And so, about 2 months later, after graduating and admittedly spending a little too much time shutting out, I came back to the project. Since then, I've started implementing features that I originally wanted but simply didn't have time for during college. The first big addition was aim down sights. Originally, every weapon was just hip fire, which worked, but it didn't really feel satisfying. So I added ADS to make weapons feel more responsive and give combat a little bit more weight. I also added proper reload animations. It's a small detail, but seeing your character actually reload and stuff, instantly refilling ammo, makes the game far more polished in my opinion, which honestly I should have just been a mandatory, but it took a long time animating each of these guns, but that's fine. And then finally, I added a dedicated knife attack. Now, if zombies get too close, you have an option besides wasting ammo, and it also brings the gameplay a little more closer to the classic COD Zombies experience I was aiming for. There's still a lot left on my roadmap before I get this game finished, but it's already come a long way from being a simple college assignment. For the next devlog, I'm hoping to tackle even more gameplay mechanics, continue polishing the visuals, and hopefully get the game one step closer to the experience I've had in my head since I first started this project. And thanks for watching. And make sure to like and subscribe and all that. Yeah, woohoo. Okay, bye.